What's going on, everyone? TM24 here, and we are back with some more Marvel Snap content. Now, with the new week upon us, it's time to take a look at the meta so that you can be prepared for this week. If you are a new viewer, welcome. Thank you for giving the channel a shot. I hope you find this video informative. We're talking about the Marvel Snap meta right now. Now, if you are a returning viewer, I really do appreciate your support. My llama here appreciates your support, especially you, Ash. But let's get going. Let's talk about these meta decks. And the first one up is the High Evolutionary Lockdown deck here. Now, of course, this is all built around High Evolutionary and how he unlocks these other cards like Wasp. In this deck, Cyclops, Thing, Abomination, and Hulk. So definitely a super strong card. I'd say he's probably one of the best ones to pick up if you got the chance to get your hands on him. But let's talk about this deck, right? So Wasp is in here. High Evolutionary is going to unlock Wasp, allowing her to afflict 2 random enemy cards with -1 power. I really like Wasp. I kind of tend to keep her unless I'm looking for maybe, you know, a discount on Abomination. I'm kind of saving Wasp potentially for turn 6. Now, next up, we've got a couple of 1-drops. We've got both Sunspot and Nebula, probably the 2 best 1-drops in the game. It feels great getting both of them down, and Sunspot especially has a ton of synergy with this deck because of High Evolutionary. You know, we can end these turns potentially without even playing a card so that we can get some of these effects like Cyclops when he's afflicting 2 random enemies with -1 power, and Hulk gaining power each time you end a turn with unspent energy. So Sunspot, tons of synergy with this deck. Nebula is great, forcing your opponent to play on there, otherwise she can get out of control. Next up, we've got Storm. Storm's just a great card, honestly, being able to kind of soft lock a lane, and us being able to put something like a Cyclops on there on turn 4, getting that effect right away, which we talked about, and getting it over and over, meaning we can probably win that Storm lane, 9 times out of 10, whether we're playing Cyclops or if we're behind and we play Thing, hitting hitting a random enemy with -1 power, so they're getting -3 and we're putting 6 down. A lot of times that's going to be enough in that lane. Additionally, we're still able to reach that lane because of cards like Dr. Doom. So Storm, great card in here. We talked about Cyclops and the effect that, the High Evolutionary brings. Super strong, great synergy with, like we said, Sunspot and Hulk. And the next card coming up is the Thing. On reveal, afflicting a random enemy, -3. Thing feels awesome in this deck. Essentially, it's a 4/9, so super strong. And then we come to our 5-drops. And this is the lockdown portion of the deck. You've got Professor X locking down a location so that they can't play there. And you've got Spider-Man. Kind of a soft lock, very similar to Storm, but preventing your opponent from playing their next turn. So we can either then finish it off with maybe an Abomination or a Hulk, or maybe we want to be able to play on all the locations and we get Dr. Doom down. Abomination, getting those discounts with the unspent energy thanks to High Evolutionary is huge. So costing 1 less for each enemy card in play that's been afflicted with negative power, and we do that through Wasp, through Cyclops, through Thing. So Abomination can come out really cheap. And then we've got our 2 6-drops. We've got Dr. Doom, who allows us to play on all 3 locations on 1 turn. Or maybe we just need a power dump and it's Hulk coming through, and potentially he could be a 620, 22, depending on how many turns you're ending, with energy still to spend. This is my favorite version of the High Evolutionary Lockdown deck. This is a super strong deck. It's the one that I'm playing the most right now because it's really consistent, and it seems quite easy to get wins with this deck. The one thing I will say, it feels a little bit funky on turn 2 if you don't hit any of these low-cost cards. Like we said, we don't mind skipping, but if our hand is super heavy and we don't have a play until 3, a lot of the times coming back can be a little bit tough. But overall, super strong deck, definitely one worth giving a shot. But let's go right into the next one here. Next up, we've got probably one of the most consistent best decks in pretty much every meta. I think this Sarah control deck has been in, I think, pretty much every meta, review / report that I've done. And, it's easy to see why. If you're seeing it for the first time, this is a deck that you should definitely learn because it hangs around because of how consistent and how strong it is. They've included Kitty Pryde in this one. Kitty Pryde can just continue to buff things like Angela and Bishop, allowing that power to kind of scale throughout the game, and then still dumping her on turn 6 with 8 with 10 power. Kitty Pryde, super strong. Our only other 1-drop is going to be Nova, and the reason that is because we've got Killmonger. Killmonger's great. If we can get Nova down early or potentially on turn 6 next to something, we'll be playing Kitty Pryde, we'll be playing Killmonger, and maybe we're playing, a Hit Monkey, something like that. Killmonger being played before Kitty Pryde allows you to buff all your cards by destroying Nova, so great synergy right there. We talked about Angela. We're trying to play on her as often as possible, and having Kitty Pryde allows us to do that. Our other 2 drops, and we've got 4 other ones, are Hit Monkey, Scarlet Witch, Sentinel, and Mysterio. So Hit Monkey and Mysterio, great combo together. That Hit Monkey can be absolutely massive, especially if you can get your Sarah down. Scarlet Witch is great for a little bit of lane control. If potentially there's a lane that's troublesome, because we have, mostly cards that are low power, she can help get rid of some of those, negative lanes for us. Sentinel is just a great source of power, continuing to fill your hand. It allows you to fit Sentinel in, maybe next to a Kitty Pryde, maybe next to a Nova, something like that, where you're still getting power out there. And then if you're buffing it at the end of the game, hey, 4 power, not too bad. We talked about Mysterio a little bit. I like to save Mysterio and Hit Monkey for turn 6, as long as we can get Sarah down. Next are our 3 drops. Bishop, he's gaining power each time we play a card. Things like Kitty Pryde allow him to get absolutely insane, as does Mysterio, because he counts as 3 for our Bishop. So Bishop can continue to grow throughout the game as well. We talked about Killmonger destroying Nova, but also Killmonger acts as a way to potentially get rid of our opponent's Sunspots, our opponent's Nebula, things like that. So again, a great utility card, perfect home for Killmonger in this deck. Next are our 4 drops, and they are our answer cards. Shang-Chi is going to take out, those big power cards, and Enchantress is going to remove the ongoing abilities. So, your Knowles, your Patriots, things like that. And then lastly, but definitely not least, is Sarah. She's giving you those discounts that allow you to absolutely go insane on turn 6. But yeah, this deck is always going to be around until something crazy comes out. Definitely one of the best decks to learn. Super consistent, can easily get you wins and allow you to climb. So I couldn't recommend this deck anymore. I made a whole video just on this deck and why it keeps hanging around and why it's so strong. I'll try and link that one here if anyone is interested in it, but hey, definitely one worth learning. But let's go to the next one. And next up, we've got another consistent deck that has been in, pretty much every meta report for the last 4 or 5, well, essentially since Modoc came out, and it's the Modoc Discard deck. This list hasn't changed at all from last time. It's super consistent, but we're still going to run through it. Our only 1-drop is going to be Nebula. It forces your opponent to play on her, otherwise she can get out of control. And then we've got 4 2-drops. Typically, you're only looking to play Morbius or Colleen Wing on 2. Ideally Morbius, just because he can continue to grow throughout the game, because you are going to be discarding cards with this deck. Our other 2 drops are going to be Wolverine and Swarm. Now, you'd love to get Swarm hit by Colleen Wing, but you can almost guarantee Modoc is going to hit Swarm, allowing you to get those 0-cost 3 power cards at the end of the game. 2 super strong 2-drops in here. These 2 drops are actually really strong for this deck. And then we've got Storm again. Storm, like I said, is just a super strong deck, and it feels great following her up with, like a Dracula on 4, or maybe you've got Morbius still in your hand. Playing Morbius onto that Storm lane means you're probably going to win that lane. Our other 3 drops are going to be Lady Sif and Swordmaster, and Lady Sif is going to be powering up your Apocalypse, because that's going to be the highest cost card in your hand. If you don't have Apocalypse in your hand, you know, I'd hesitate playing Lady Sif because you're probably hitting Modoc or Dracula, and those are not cards that you want to hit with Lady Sif. Swordmaster is great, 3 for 6, discards a card from your hand. I'm a little bit hesitant to play Swordmaster just because I don't like the randomness. I feel like it hits me in the worst way most of the time, so I typically don't play Swordmaster, but he's included in almost every single Modoc Discard deck that I've seen. Now, turn 4 is Dracula. That's the only card you're looking to play on turn 4, because then you've got the option to play Apocalypse or Chavez on 6. Turn 5 belongs to Modoc because you want to discard, hopefully your Swarm, hopefully your Wolverine, so that Wolverine can pop out as a 2/4. You get a couple of free Swarms. Ideally, you've hit Apocalypse, buffing him up even more, and then you're just kind of ready to go into turn 6, where you can decide, do I need to play my Chavez, or do I need to play Apocalypse? If you need more power in a particular lane, you can play Apocalypse. If you don't, you can just leave Apocalypse in your hand, and, you know, Dracula will hit him. So again, another super consistent deck that has been around in this metagame for a long time, so definitely one worth learning. I know some of these cards are, you know, a little bit tougher to obtain, especially Modoc, but the rest of them are pretty accessible, so a super strong deck if you like discard. Let's go to the next one, and we finally got a new deck, and it's Move. Now, I was a little bit surprised when I was doing my research for this video. You know, I'm using Marvel Snap Zone, not in any way affiliated with them, but this is where I found these decks, and this is the Move deck that they said is the one performing the best in the meta right now. Now, this isn't the Move deck that I use, but we'll talk about this one. It's just classic Move, right? You've got Iron Fist that's going to allow you to push a card to the left. You've got Nightcrawler who can move, allowing you to get that discount on Spider-Man. Our 2-drops, we've got 4 of them. Dagger, when you're moving to that location, she's getting +2 for each card there. Craven, when cards move to that location, he gets +2. And then our other ones are Multiple Man, who's going to leave a copy, and Cloak, who allows you to move cards to his lane. I mean, this is all centered around moving your cards and getting those cards buffed up. Next are our 3-drops. Doctor Strange is going to pull your highest power card. So ideally, if you can get Multiple Man hit with something like a Hulkbuster, you know, merge your Multiple Man with Hulkbuster and then move it with Doctor Strange, you're getting a couple of 7 power cards in different lanes. That can be super strong. Vulture, when he's moving, he's getting +5 power. Just move him one time and he feels like he's already paid off. Move him twice and you're probably going to win the game. Hulkbuster, you know, you're just adding 4 power to a card. Ideally, you're hitting something that can continue to grow, like Vulture or like Multiple Man. Multiple Man not growing, but leaving copies behind, you know, buffing up multiple lanes. Our only 4-drop in this deck is actually Spider-Man. Ideally, he's coming out as a 1/5, so super strong deck, or super strong card. Definitely going to have him in here. Our 5-drop is Vision. Being able to move him to a location that you otherwise wouldn't be able to reach is huge. And then last but not least, the king of all move decks, and it's Heimdall. Moving all cards to the left, ideally buffing and leaving those lanes even stronger than before. Now, like I said, this was the one that I found, but it's not the one that I run myself. Now, I make a couple changes here, and actually, I don't run Multiple Man, and right now, I'm not running Vision either. Instead, I'm running Human Torch, and I'm running the new card Ghost Spider, because what I like about this deck is that you can fit a lot of cards into, into plays 4 and 5 because they're so cheap. And Human Torch is another huge source of power. With him being able to double up, simply going Human Torch on 1, Ghost Spider on 2, and all of a sudden you've got 7 power by turn 2 can feel really strong. And because we're able to move these cards so many times, thanks to Cloak, thanks to Doctor Strange, thanks to Heimdall, you can get a ton of value out of cards like Human Torch, Dagger, and Craven and Vulture. So this is the one that I actually run. You know, it's fairly cheap, and of course we've still got our big finisher in Heimdall. So this is my favorite version of the move deck, but I can understand how the classic is doing well right now as well. But like I said, I love the upside of Human Torch and the ability to move more cards with Ghost Spider. So this is what I'm running, but hey, Move is back in the meta, and that is a great thing because it was underrepresented for a long time. But let's get to the last card, or the last deck in this report here. And it's another super consistent one. It's this Null Death deck. This one's been in this meta review for the past, for the past 3-4 weeks as well. And, it's easy to see why. There's tons of consistent power. Null and Death can be huge coming down, especially Null, but, playing essentially a free 12 power is absolutely insane. You've got answers thanks to Killmonger. Angel's the one card that I don't particularly like in this deck, and in the last review I said I would change it out, but I wasn't sure with what I would change it out at the time. I mean, there's a clear option here, and it is Yondu, because it helps with the destroy, so it's going to help discount your death. So that's one change that I would make to this deck, but otherwise it's pretty strong. You're trying to destroy Nova to buff the rest of these cards. We just talked about Yondu a little bit. He's going to contribute to Death's counter and actually Null's as well. So Yondu is a great inclusion. Bucky, you're really in for the Winter Soldier and of course the destroy aspect of Bucky, giving you again discounts and buffing Null. Our other 2-drops are Carnage and Wolverine. Carnage, you can get up to 8 power for a 2-drop, pretty strong. You can destroy Wolverine multiple times, so his power can also scale as well. We talked about Killmonger being kind of an answer to those things like Nebula, the Sunspot, things like that, and also buffing up your own cards. You don't mind getting rid of Yondu because he's not that much power anyway. And then our 3-drops are going to be Venom and Sabretooth. It's nice to see Sabretooth in here because a 0-4, being able to destroy it multiple times, can actually be pretty strong. Being able to play a 0 cost on turn 6 as just an extra 4 power is great as well. Venom, ever since that buff, Venom has been a great card. And he was already pretty good before, but being at 3 instead of that 1 definitely feels strong. Deathlock, Deathlock's just adding to both Null and Death. So huge inclusion here, and those are all super cheap, and then they're kind of anchored by these 3 6-drops, right? You've got Zola, who can actually come in huge if you're sending something like Venom to destroy some other lanes. You're adding to that Null, you're adding to that Death, and it can be Zola can be a nice kind of surprise card. It allows you to reach lanes that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. So definitely kind of a sneaky but a really nice inclusion. And then kind of the 2 cards that are staples in this deck are Null and Death, and it's easy to see why. You can get basically a free Death out there and a super strong Null. So overall, again, another consistently strong deck. But just looking at kind of these, these 5 decks, it's really nice to see, because I feel like the meta is in a really good place right now where tons of decks can be competitive. Just because these 5 seem to be leading the meta right now, it doesn't mean that you can't go out there and experiment, because that's what a lot of people are doing. A lot of decks are, a lot of people are trying different things, and you're seeing decks that you weren't before. Everyone remembers the Shuri meta when every person was playing those Shuri decks, so it's nice to see a meta where so many different decks can thrive. But this has kind of been, a breakdown of what decks are leading the meta right now. We had the High Evolutionary Lockdown. We've got the Sarah Control deck, which is in basically every meta report. We've got the Modoc Discard, which again has been around for a long time, ever since Modoc came into the game. Then we've got Move, which this is my version, but I think Move is just super strong. So if you find a version that works for you, hey, give it a shot and keep climbing with it. And then last but definitely not least is the Null Death kind of destroy decks that are around as well. Like I said, I really enjoy where the meta is at. I think it's great for the game that lots of decks can compete. And, I hope you give one of these decks a shot. But, if you've hung around till now, I do appreciate you watching the video and hearing out my explanations of the decks and why I think they're working. So thank you for hanging out. If you haven't subscribed or hit that like button yet, now would be a really good time to do so. But until next time, have some fun.